Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Presented by Junk Be Gone, Phoenix Conversions.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Sports Source. It's a bright, sunny, a little rainy, but bright, sunny day. And it's figurative as well because we actually have football to talk about. Real, actual football. I feel like doing a dance or a prayer of thanks that we are finally to football season, and there is a football season at this moment. We'll talk about the Vols practice. We'll talk about what other SEC coaches are saying anonymously when asked about UT. We'll talk about the fact that there's a new schedule out. We'll look at that from top to bottom, and we'll talk a little bit about ESPN looking at that same schedule and saying 4-6 for your Volunteers this year. Lots to cover. Let's get right into it. First segment of the Sports Source brought to you today by Phoenix Conversions. Since 1987, there's been one place to turn if you want to customize your personal or work vehicles. Racks, sliding trays, toolboxes, even ramps and lifts and other options if you need handicap access. Place to turn, Phoenix Conversions. They've been doing it for a lot of years, and they do it better than anybody. You can check them out at that website right there. You can check them out by just dropping in on them, and you can check them out on Facebook as well. We appreciate Phoenix Conversions for being a big part of the Sports Source. All right, let's welcome in our panelists for the day. From WNML right here, we have Josh Ward. Josh, thanks for being here.
Thank you, John.
Next to you, in booth number 2, we have David Oven from The Athletic. David, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it. Good to be back in the penalty box.
And down on that end, that's right, it is the penalty box. Down on that end, Vince Ferrara, also from WNML. Vince, thanks for joining us today.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Sean.
All right. As I said, it's a good day because there's real live football to discuss. Let's start this first segment with the offensive line. Okay, we got the word earlier this week that Cade Mays didn't get clearance from the NCAA, and we'll tackle that in a couple of segments from now, more in depth. But that has created a little bit more motion on the right side of the line, guys at different positions. This is supposed to be the strength of the team. No one's over there to see it, but the coaches seem to be saying the right things about what they are seeing behind the closed doors in terms of that offensive line. Response, thoughts on what we're getting out of camp over there regarding this offensive line, which is supposed to be the tip-top area of this football team.
Yeah, you hope that it is a sign of the long off-season discussion of what could help lead Tennessee to a higher level, and that is an offensive line where Cade Mays is a big part of it and what he can do, and that question remains. But Trey Smith returning, Brandon Kennedy returning, and then young players who have a chance to develop like Kayron Calvert, Wanya Morris, and Darnell Wright. Jameer Johnson, you have experience, you have talent, you have more depth to work with or without Cade Mays. Obviously, Cade still ends up being a big deal, but you have more pieces to work with and more probably understanding what they're being asked to do compared to a year ago.
Yeah, I still think it's a little early. I mean, you're talking about putting on full pads, or really any pads, yesterday for the first time since the Gator Bowl, probably. I think he only had 2 practices in the spring, that acclimation period. So, I think the coaches are a little curious still. But, yeah, I think they'll be okay on the right side. I think losing Cade makes that ceiling a little bit lower in terms of how great the offensive line can be unless you get him back and he's playing. But they're okay. I think, you're pushing Darnell Wright probably to start at right tackle. I think you'll see Kayron Calvert at guard. Maybe we'll see if Jameer Johnson moves in the right tackle spot. But it's going to be they're okay, but you still – it's a little more of a concern, certainly.
And those guys, Wright and Calvert, have been flipping and flopping in practice so far. So they're each getting a taste at both of those positions.
Yeah, and the flip-flopping at the 2 tackles as well, with Wanya Morris working some at right tackle and Darnell Wright at left tackle. And then without Cade Mays in that first group, you saw Jerome Carvin, who is one of the veterans of the group. I think it has the depth is coming through right now because, just like Josh and David mentioned, some of the other options, and they've listed a number of names, and there's more out there as well. Plus, you don't feel like you're in a position to have to force true freshmen onto the field right now either. So I think they are in a good spot, and I like them, as Pruitt talked about, moving guys in different positions because in games when necessary, that's what they do.
Another big plus is the fact that Trey Smith is going to get more practice reps this year. Of course, last year he barely got practice reps at all in terms of actual snaps in practice hitting anybody. He's going to get more of that this year because he's got the health issues a year behind him now. I think that's a huge step forward because we saw how good he was last year even without much practice. it would only, you would think, make sense that he's going to be that much better a player if he can actually get out there and hit during the week. So I think that's a big step, the fact that Smith's going to be able to actually take part in practice a little bit more this year.
Yeah, last year I think he only participated in 2 full contact practices.
Yeah.
When he came back, they were talking about they wanted to do it once a week. I think they're going to sort of dip their toe in and sort of see how it goes. But I think that I would guess that's sort of the aim. They've been super dodgy about any details of what they're doing with Trey in practice. Like, we didn't even know that he only practiced full contact twice all of last season
until the end of the year.
Until the end of the year. So, we'll see. I think they're, trying to do what they can do, and Trey's been comfortable with it. So, sort of we'll see how it goes. He didn't show on the field last year. He was great.
Yeah. Go ahead, Vince.
No, I was just going to say, we kind of had a clue because they adjusted their practice schedule for Trey Smith, and why not? And then what helps is the 25 practices. You have 42 days to accomplish those 25 practices, and that's what Pruitt kind of pointed to that would allow him to get some of those contact practices.
David brings up a good point here. They have closed out the media completely. I mean, it used to be that you get in there and see first 5-10 minutes, and then they threw you out. Now, though, it's pretty much locked down due to COVID, and I'm not surprised the football coaches all across the country are like, hey, we got an excuse to completely block people. But a lot of folks talking about practice right now, we're going to be covering a lot of the same things because it's coming out through the coaches. It's, some of us have some people we talk to over there, but for the most part, it's going to be what UT's coaches tell us. How much are we meant to trust that, Josh? I mean, we're cynics by nature. I don't trust a lot of it, but we're having to talk about it. So when they say Trey Smith's going to get more, we said, yeah, Trey Smith's going to get more. David's right. Right. They say he's going to get more. Who knows? Where are you on this whole preseason when we're all just going to be going by what UT tells us? There's a danger in that.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a qualifier to all of these conversations of as we're told or as we hear. Even still, most seasons we're kind of guessing going in because there's, like we used to see scrimmages, and that would give you a good idea, and that stopped here in the last few years.
Well, yeah, I mean, going into last season, I don't remember anybody throwing up any warning flares.
Right.
Beware of Georgia State.
Yeah.
This team's really sucky right now.
Right.
I didn't see anybody. None of us said that.
Yeah, and this is all happening, though, in a year where everything is already different, and
Right.
you have a different kind of schedule. So last year you're starting with Georgia State, and we know how that went. But typically, or often, you start with a weaker opponent. Now it's starting at South Carolina. What is that travel experience going to be like? There's so many unknowns that we're not going to get figured out until they actually hit the field on Saturdays.
And for what it's worth, I think, Jerry Pruitt, he's not a big, craft the narrative guy. He just sort of, he's just not going to tell you stuff.
Right.
He's just not going to be very detailed.
Stop the narrative.
Yeah, he's not going to be like, oh, this guy was terrible in practice today as a sort of a motivating tool. He doesn't really do that. He just won't really say anything in detail. And so, I guess that makes me feel better that we're not going to be sort of sold this bill of goods because he's the only guy that's really, going to be saying a whole lot.
There is a danger, though, to the bill of goods being sold because if you remember 2005 specifically, Tennessee was projected to be number 3 in the country, I think, going into that season. Listening to the coaches, they'd closed everything down, so you really couldn't see anything. And the coaches talked, oh, looking great over here, it's fantastic. They go 5-6 that year. That's the year, the first losing season for Philip Fulmer. It really starts the ball rolling. And then as the season plays on, you had officials who had worked their scrimmages in the summer and in the fall camp that said, oh, yeah, they were sloppy as hell during fall camp, too. It's like, whoa. We didn't hear any of that from the coaches. We just heard that, we're ready to compete for championships and everything else. So there is a danger in the fact that they close up the walls. And I know fans don't care. They don't want to hear it. They think it's media crying about media being blocked out. But it's really blocking everybody out. No one's going to know much until that first game at Columbia is my guess.
And I think sometimes it's not always a bill of goods if it doesn't play out because coaches will compliment them, some certain players, early on in camp, and then it plays out. Like, for example, Warren Burrell. We heard so much about Warren Burrell, and he started the first 4 games of the season, and then we really didn't see him as much. He struggled a little bit. So that's out of their hands. He maybe actually thought that Warren Burrell would be able to stick and help them early on. And I'm not burying him because I think Warren Burrell's going to be fantastic, but I'm just saying sometimes they tell us what they feel, but it doesn't play out necessarily that way. And usually the players, I think, can give us the best indication of who they like and who is impressing because it just kind of slides out and they're not anticipating the.
You guys are nice guys. You're right. I think they occasionally sell you a bill of goods. All right. One thing I do want to throw this up quickly in terms of bill of goods. A lot of Tennessee fans, we opened the show talking about the offensive line. A lot of Tennessee fans expect this to be the strength of the team. You can't stop this offensive line. It's going to be fantastic. Pro Football Focus, who covers college football as well, they put out their preseason all SEC offensive line. Let's take a look at this. There are 4 guys from the SEC East. One team has 2 guys, and it's not Tennessee, it's Kentucky. It has 2 offensive linemen. The only Tennessee offensive lineman on the Pro Football Focus list is Trey Smith. I thought that was interesting.
Well, Kentucky's a good example of the August, now heading into September preseason conversation that exists, because there's some positive things being said about Kentucky and how good the Wildcats could be. And in Knoxville especially, there is a quick dismissal of how good Kentucky can be, because head-to-head the Vols have had success. But last year was close, and Kentucky's a really interesting early game for Tennessee when we talk about the schedule.
I just think it's interesting that with all the talk about Tennessee and that line, you go to a neutral group here, and it's like, we kind of like 2 guys off the Kentucky line better. You would think with all the hype going toward Tennessee's line that if I told you there's 4 from the East on this 5-man team, 2 of them from one team, you would think, well, who are the 2 Tennessee guys? No, it's just one Tennessee guy, Trey Smith. I just thought that was interesting. Doesn't mean they're right. I just thought it was interesting.
Because they hate the Vols.
It is because they hate the Vols. I forgot to add Pro Football Focus to the long list of people who hate the Vols. All right, when we come back, let's talk about players returning, players moving, who's popping among the freshmen. We got a lot of cover today, talking practice right off the bat. We'll do that more next on the Sports Source.